We are kicking off the new year. Todd is out this month, so I will be flying solo. In the docs section, you will find today's presentation and a few other helpful links there. For those of you who haven't taken a look, there's a couple of new things around exposure management. Exposure management is the term for what is happening in the vulnerability management world today. It's kind of a consolidation of or an evolution of how we're trying to approach the vulnerability management problem. More importantly, how to expand that beyond what the traditional boundaries of vulnerability management typically covered. More emphasis on asset discovery, remediation, and the end-to-end process shifting. Surprisingly, there's still a lot of organizations that are doing CVSS as kind of a base metric for how they're prioritizing things. Another piece of exposure management is doubling down on that, getting better vulnerability intel and providing a more risk-based approach. So depending on your organization, and if you're just using CVSS or CVSS plus the CSEC KEV list, this is just kind of expanding on that. So there's a maturity and strategy guide there, some really good content, some things that myself and one of my counterparts on the marketing side here, Rob, we covered last year in a couple of live events. So if you want to take a look at those, they're free to download. Go ahead and grab those. And most importantly, though, today's presentation, which will have all the links, the information, everything that we're going to be covering today is in there. So that is the good stuff that, of course, you are here for. All right. We're going to go through today's overview, cover some hot topics in the news, and then we're going to cover the bulletins and releases for this month, along with what we call Between the Patch Tuesdays. There's a lot of activity that happens between these fun monthly events, and that oftentimes will drive some awareness and cleanup activities that we need to do to make sure that we're on top of things. So we're going to cover a number of releases that came out in between. All right. So this month, at the point where we turned out our normal content, we had the release from Adobe. Now, there were more releases from Adobe than the 4 that we're covering here, but these are the 4 that are supported in our catalog. They're part of the Creative Suite. The other updates from Adobe also had some critical vulnerabilities in them, and the highest priority, Cold Fusion, shifts more over to the development side. So put that in the bucket of dev tools. If you're using Cold Fusion, there was a critical vulnerability in there that was pushing that one up to a priority 1, which is the highest priority from Adobe from their prioritization standpoint. Everything else, even though they had critical CVEs, were priority 3s, meaning, just kind of normal course of business, get those tested and rolled out. A priority 1 in Adobe terms is look into it, as a, don't defer the priority on that one. Start looking into it without delay. So if you are running Cold Fusion, there are some nuances in that release. I believe they had some recommendations about versions of the JDK to be able to use, to be able to update that as well. So if your team is looking into that, they'll want to read up on that and make sure that they are on top of things. Microsoft had 6 bulletins. We typically break things down into bulletins and cover them from that perspective. And 4 of those were really critical. 2 were important. And then Mozilla had 3 updates that they released that also included some vulnerabilities that were suspected to be exploited. So Microsoft had 1 known exploited that we're going to cover. Mozilla have 2 suspected of being exploited that we're going to talk about. And then there's 2 public disclosures on the Microsoft side we're going to talk about. That's the big topic of, what's going on right now that we're going to just make sure that everybody's aware of. What are the things that you need to review because you may have actions you need to take in the next few months? And what are the things that are more urgent that you don't want to delay or defer, and make sure to get those resolved. I do have a collection of news articles that we're going to start with. So, all right, first article that I pulled up, the Register did a pretty good job of covering the urgency around the Microsoft zero-day exploit. The CVSS on this one is actually pretty low. It's only a 5.5. It's an information disclosure, which, hey, how bad can it be, really? But the challenge with this one is this is the first point in a chain attack. Microsoft didn't give us the information about what vulnerabilities they're chaining with. Probably lesser importance there because there are probably other CVEs that weren't new. There were other things that were exposed in cases as well. The most important part of here is this CVE is giving threat actors access to critical information that then lets them go and exploit something else. Kill this, you kill that attack chain. So that's kind of the critical part here, and where, again, risk-based prioritization helps us to drive awareness to where we need to take action first. No matter what Microsoft says about the importance of this, it's only rated important. No matter what CVSS says about this, it's only a 5.5. The fact of the matter is threat actors are taking advantage of this and chaining it with other vulnerabilities because they're able to get sensitive information that lets them take that next action. Kill this vulnerability, we kill their current attack chain. So there's some comments from some industry experts about the vulnerability. You can go ahead and read up on those in more detail if you want to, but that's kind of the key takeaway here. This is a vulnerability that is being chained with others. Don't dismiss it because it's a 5.5 and only rated important and an information disclosure. The other two vulnerabilities we're going to talk about in a few minutes here, but the two public disclosures, more importantly, there's additional things that you need to review in your environment and potential actions you're going to need to take. One of them, unfortunately, painfully, is another secure boot concern. So there's a vulnerability and there's some certs that are going to be coming up on expiration in the next 6 months or so. So there's action to be taken. And any of you who have gone through all of the pain and anguish of resolving secure boot vulnerabilities in the past, you know that there's probably going to be a potential moderate to large pile of work for you to go through to make sure you've accounted for everything you need to do. So we're going to talk about those in just a minute, but that's the first article for today. The second one is CISA has flagged a vulnerability here in Gogs. Gogs is a Go-based equivalent to like GitHub that developers may be using. And it is absolutely being used to great effect to exploit a vulnerability right now. So this one is pretty startling. This vulnerability, if you're using Gogs, is definitely one you want to make sure your teams are taking a very close look on. They probably are by now because this has been getting beat up since November. Wiz did a bunch of research on this. There's a lot more of this tends to be more global. In the US, there are some hotspots that are using this, but in the global community, it tends to be being used more. Wiz research found that over 1,400 Gogs servers were exposed online, the component that was being exploited. And of those, 1,250 still remain exposed as of the time of this article. And more than 700 of those instances are showing signs of compromise. So that's a pretty startling impact. There's guidance provided by CISA and by Wiz how to, layer some additional security in front of this so that it's not just publicly exposed without any additional layers of protection. So things like putting it behind a VPN or allow list, mitigations that you can absolutely put in place quickly and easily. And more importantly, you want to get that vulnerability resolved and make sure that you plug that as well. And whatever steps you may need to take to make sure that you've cleaned up and have resolved any compromises to your environment. So if Gogs is being used in your environment and you're not aware of what actions have been taken or what state that is in currently, probably a good idea to bring it up and make sure that things are being resolved. So that's the second article. The third one that seems to be hitting a lot of news articles right now was a 0-day in VMware ESXi server to escape virtual machines and be able to do much more nefarious things across the environment. So there's a combination of things going on in here. The Chinese-speaking threat actors in this case are suspected to have been leveraging a compromised SonicWall VPN appliance for initial access. From there, they are going over to the ESXi side and exploiting vulnerabilities to expand beyond that. This is coming from some research done by the cybersecurity firm Huntress. If you want to, you can go and check out what they've observed. This was information released in December. Most notably, though, the attack is believed to have exploited 3 VMware vulnerabilities, and you can see all 3 of those VMware vulnerabilities are 2025 CVEs. So if you're running SonicWall look into that. Make sure that your SonicWall VPNs are up to date. That has been the entry point in these cases. And then if you're running ESXi, check your VMware updates and make sure that you've got those 3 CVEs covered there. If they successfully exploit this, it could permit a malicious actor with admin privileges to leak memory from the virtual machine's executable, the VMX process, or execute code as the VMX process, which if they've got the ability to do those two things, they could do a lot of harm. So that is a couple of areas that you might want to take a look into to make sure that infrastructure teams are keeping up with it. Infrastructure and network edge teams are keeping up with updates to those technologies. And then the last one here is on the Cisco side. Chinese hackers are exploiting customers within Cisco's ecosystem. The 2 products that are affected here are Cisco Secure Email Gateway and Cisco Secure Email and Web Manager. Cisco is saying that it discovered a hacking campaign back in early December targeting the Cisco Async OS software. That's the software running those 2 technologies. The feature called Spam Quarantine is one that can be enabled and reachable from the internet. So that's kind of the entry point in this case. Kevin Boma, which many of you probably know is a security researcher who is tracking the campaign behind this one, has some more information here about that. If you have been compromised, rebuilding the appliance is currently the only viable option to eradicate the threat actor's persistence from your environment. At the moment, I don't believe there is a release resolving the issues. So go to the security advisory on the Cisco side and check up for more information there. But if you are using these 2 Cisco products, you may have to look into some mitigation and also to look for indicators of compromise to make sure that your systems have not been hit. All right, so that is the broader kind of news lineup of major activities that we've been seeing this month. The Microsoft vulnerability that is actively being exploited is this one here, the 2026-0891. Again, it was only rated important for a severity, only has a CVSS score of 5.5, but this is that vulnerability that is starting off the attack chain for threat actors to give them the information they need to be able to exploit this vulnerability. With this, they can use the information exploited here to exploit other exposures within your environment. Microsoft wasn't clear about what other activities were happening past this one. They're specifically resolving this vulnerability, so that to me says the other vulnerabilities were exposures that already exist or tools or capabilities already in your environment that they're taking advantage of with that information. So this is in all OS versions, including Windows 10 and Server 2012. So if you are running ESU, you're going to be covered on those. If you're not running ESU, this is yet one more vulnerability that's adding to that exposure on your legacy systems. So make sure that you're taking that seriously and looking into either getting ESU coverage or getting those systems further mitigated or removed from your environment. The next 2 CVEs from Microsoft were the public disclosures. In this case, the first one, this is one that Microsoft talked about back in October. And in October, they talked about the disclosure, no exploitation, but disclosure of vulnerabilities for this. It's this EGAIR software modem driver component within the drivers are in the OS. So that is something that's there. Whether or not you're using it, the driver is there. The elevation of privilege vulnerability is what's being resolved here. And how they're resolving it is they are removing that driver from natively shipping with supported Windows OS editions. So this is just announcing that .sys file, those 2 .sys files have been removed, and the driver is completely removed from the Windows OS as of the 2026 cumulative update. Microsoft is further recommending that you look into any dependencies on this hardware within your environment and looking to remove that. So that's the resolution from Microsoft is they are removing the driver. There is no new version of that driver available to resolve this. If an attacker were to successfully attack your environment and compromise this exploit, they could gain full system privileges on the target systems. Is the vulnerability only exploitable if the EGAIR soft modem is actively being used? No, all supported versions of Windows can be affected by a successful exploitation of this vulnerability, even if the modem is not actively being used. So for those of you not using this, you don't have a dependency on it, just get the cumulative update in place. Those driver sys files will be removed. The exploitable code will be no longer in your environment. Again, affects all Windows editions, server and workstation, all the way back to Windows 10 and Server 2012. Actually, Server 2008, again, for those who might be wondering how is that still getting updates, don't know who, don't know where, but somebody big for a lot of money most likely has paid Microsoft to continue that, but it's not generally available as an ESU program. So I'm very confident that most of you are not continuing to patch Server 2008. So, and hopefully most of you don't have Server 2008 running at all anymore in your environment. All right. Well, my machine hung there for a second. So, all right. Last Microsoft CVE that we're going to talk about in more depth here is the Secure Boot vulnerability, also flagged as a public disclosure. In this case, it's a security feature bypass. What's happening here is there's a number of certificates that Microsoft manages that are coming up on their expiration. And then you may have certificates that could be expiring as well. The guidance here is to go and follow up on Microsoft's additional documentation about this, along with pushing this month's cumulative update. There's additional steps to take to make sure that you don't have any expired certs being utilized in Secure Boot, and that you're taking steps to clean any of those up. The operating system certificate update protection mechanism relies on firmware components that might contain defects, which can cause certificate trust updates to fail or behave predictably. So this is what threat actors are really exploiting here. Any expired certs could cause this. These are the three that Microsoft has that you'd specifically have to be aware of. But this could lead to potential disruptions of Secure Boot trust chain that requires careful validation and deployments to restore intended security guarantees. Now, Microsoft has some guidance down here. If an attacker exploits this, they could bypass Secure Boot, which would be bad. To understand more about this, Microsoft has this guide here. There's also additional links for actions you need to take. So most of you are going to be looking into this Windows devices with IT managed updates and also the Secure Boot FAQ to get the details on what actions you need to take. But go ahead and start looking into that to make sure you're staying ahead of this challenge. For any of you who have been through the Secure Boot vulnerabilities before, you know it's ongoing. It's going to take a little while to fully clean up. You can see here, these expiration dates are out to June and later in the year, but it may take you a little while to get organized, identify everything that needs to be done, and then start actually planning and taking action. So don't delay until May to do this. Start taking a look sooner rather than later to make sure you stay ahead of any configuration changes or efforts you need to do. Again, affects Server 2012 and Windows 10 and later editions of the OS. So anywhere Secure Boot might be getting used, this is a concern. We're going to switch gears and talk about a couple of Linux vulnerabilities. The first one is probably the most important one here. This is, those of you who remember React to Shell, still ongoing. There's still a lot of people who are exposed to this. So this is kind of just a awareness. Make sure that you're looking into that React to Shell CVE within your environment and making sure you get everything resolved. There's a number of React server components or packages that are exposed to this. So review any React implementations that you have and make sure that you're getting that cleaned up throughout your environment, because attacks are still ongoing. By the way, if you haven't heard the Linux updates before, this is information that we're getting from one of our partners, TuxCare. They specialize in the Linux world. That's what they do. It's what they do best. And they have a lot of subject matter experts that keep a close eye on top vulnerabilities there. This is the top one that they're concerned about right now, and making sure that they're bringing awareness to their customers and the broader community. The next two CVEs are both kernel vulnerabilities, and probably the two that need the most attention next. But basically, if you're keeping up with your kernel updates for all your Linux distributions, you should be able to stay on top of many of these vulnerabilities. Neither of the other two have been exploited. In this case, the first one is a vulnerability discovered in IPv6 implementations in the Linux kernel. The issue arises from not properly using the RCU when accessing DST-dev, which could lead to memory safety violations. It is affecting multiple Linux distributions. So depending on what flavors of Linux you're running, you may have multiple you need to look into to get updated there. And version information is below telling you which versions to take a look for. The next one is another Linux kernel vulnerability. Seems to be very much in the Ubuntu Debian family again. The flaw here involves improper protection of access to DST-dev again, but a different component within there. The vulnerability was discovered in the Linux kernel related to RCU read copy update protection in network operations. So the issue has been resolved in newer kernel versions. Debian has fixed the vulnerability in 6.17.6.1, and later releases, the fix implements proper RCU protection by using DST-dev RCU in the affected functions. So in both of those cases, getting your kernel updates in place is the resolution there. We don't have any immediate lifecycle expirations here. Everything is going to be coming up towards the later part of 2026 is the next point where we have some end of support dates. So 24H2 for the Windows 11 Home and Pro editions, 23H2 for the Windows 11 Enterprise and EDU. Later in the year here, you're going to need to make sure that you've got machines moved off of those editions. So take a look around, make sure that you don't have too much hanging out there on those older versions and you get a project plan in place to upgrade those. LTSC looks like 27 is still the first point where we've got any expirations there. Server 2016 coming up on its end of support for LTSC. So a little bit of time there, but again, I've talked with a few organizations who have a lot of Server 2016 infrastructure still in place. Better to get started sooner rather than later and make sure that you get things moved off of there. We're at 1 year out from that LTSC expiration, so you may have some effort to get things migrated off of there and towards a newer platform. And we've been through Windows 10 ESU quite a bit. I don't think we need to touch on that too much, but if you do have any questions, let me know there. Otherwise, we will move on. Content announcements. For those of you who aren't aware, you can subscribe to content feeds for any of the Ivanti products to make sure that you're getting the latest on what we're releasing and when. It is a continuous process. We pretty much have content releases daily, depending on which product lines. Most of our products get at least every couple of days are getting content updates to keep up with all of those third-party applications in between. There was a question about any Ivanti security updates this month. No, Ivanti does not have any security advisories this month. I touched on it in our blog. I didn't mention it yet here, but thank you, Matthew, for bringing that up. There are no Ivanti security updates this month. So, all right, I will be playing the part of Todd for this next portion. Jumping through all of the security updates for this month, starting off with Adobe. This was the update for Adobe InDesign. Majority of the Adobe updates, like I mentioned before, were rated critical, but most of them, actually all but Cold Fusion, were a priority 3, not a priority 1. In Adobe terms, this really means, there are vulnerabilities in here that are critical. Remote code execution or arbitrary code execution is possible with some of these CVEs. The recommendation from Adobe in this case is, investigate, test and make sure you can roll this out without impacting your environments. It's not a defer. It is just you don't need to take immediate urgent action. A priority 1, like the Cold Fusion update, that's more of a urgent, hey, investigate this and make sure that you're getting any details that are needed in place so that you can take action and not be delayed or impacted by that. So there are critical CVEs in here. We would recommend just making sure that this is part of your normal monthly maintenance, not something that you need to track as a higher priority though. In this case, there were 5 CVEs resolved in the InDesign update. This one will require an application restart. The Illustrator update, similar, critical in severity. There were 2 CVEs, one of which has the ability to allow arbitrary code execution as well. Again, application restart is required. The InCopy update is also critical. Only 1 CVE resolved in this case. Arbitrary code execution is possible, and an application restart would be required. And for Adobe Bridge, critical 1 CVE resolved, arbitrary code execution. So all of them are critical. They all have at least one CVE, can allow that arbitrary code execution, which is the nastiest of impacts that you can have. But again, just make sure that you're testing this adequately and getting it rolled out as part of your regular monthly maintenance. Firefox, on the other hand, we've got some suspected exploits in the wild. So Mozilla is a little bit cautious of this. They haven't got a confirmed case, like an investigation directly involving them that they've been pulled into or something like that, that confirmed these have absolutely been exploited. What they have is enough evidence to say that they suspect that these are the CVEs that have been exploited. So they're drawing the attention to the CVEs and making sure people are aware that there is enough evidence here to suspect exploitation of these vulnerabilities. So they're putting, well, the vulnerability or the update in this case is set as a high, which is their highest severity rating on the Mozilla side, and they're urging customers to update as soon as possible. So the two CVEs highlighted in red are the two that are suspected to be exploited. So that was regular update, or Firefox 147 is the update there. And then for Firefox ESR 115, there's no suspected exploited vulnerabilities there, but there are 5 vulnerabilities resolved. It's still a high severity, and you've all heard me talk about this quite a bit, but I recommend trying to do browser updates on a weekly basis at least. Yes, there are auto updaters in the browsers, but that is not a guarantee that your auto updaters are, 1, working, and 2, that your users are allowing it to do its job. So we do highly recommend using patch management solutions as a kind of additional layer of defense to make sure you're closing browser vulnerabilities quickly and efficiently. There have been numerous cases where vulnerabilities in the browser go on for, potentially up to, multiple weeks without being resolved because the end user just doesn't actually allow the update feature to finish its job by closing out the browsers and making sure everything completes. So if you're using like our Ivanti Neurons patch solution, we have that priority updates bucket. We usually use the example of browsers as the top example of what to use with that. That's doing more of a frequency of weekly or even daily to check for specific high-risk applications that you would want to update more frequently. Browsers being one of them. Telecommunications apps like Zoom and other things like that being other ones that, if there's vulnerabilities, they're highly targeting users and highly susceptible to exploit very quickly, and getting those resolved in a short period of time will minimize your risk window. So the other ESR branch, though, the 140 branch, has one of the 2 CVEs. So CVE 2026-0891 is present there. So this one as well, suspected of being exploited in the wild. So your current release, the 147, and your more recent ESR branch, the 140 branch, both have those suspected of exploitation vulnerabilities present in them. So Chris's question in the chat was, there's no real evidence of these Firefox vulnerabilities having been definitely exploited yet. Correct, Chris. They don't have like, here's an absolute confirmed case that this is exactly what they did. They know that exploits have occurred. They're suspecting these 2 vulnerabilities were the points of entry for those exploits. So that's why they're drawing attention to this. For Firefox to say that they suspect these 2 are it, there's a high likelihood. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have done this if there was a remote chance. So the urgency is there. I wouldn't say stop everything and go into 0-day response mode, but make sure that you're getting Firefox updated throughout your environment within the next week or 2 would be highly recommended. So that would be my guidance there, if that makes sense. All right, getting into the Microsoft updates. The Windows 11 update was critical this month. We've got 92 CVEs were resolved in the Windows 11 update this month. You can see highlighted in red below are the known exploited and the known disclosures. So all 3 of the exploit and disclosure CVEs from Microsoft this month are all in the OS. So this is where our urgency is. By the way, it's also a rather large one in size. We have AI components shipping with this month's update again. So the Windows 11 update is between 3.9 gig and 4.2, 4.3 gig in size. Expect that that you're going to have a lot of bits flying around your network. So yeah, that's a rather large update. Now, the good news, if you read my blog post or if you're on the Microsoft Insiders, I think is where they put out the announcement, they actually split Server 2025 into a separate KB so that they could split the two updates. So the Server 2025 update is only 1.9 gig in size, so roughly half the size. So it didn't have to ship all of the other end user facing AI features that changed or updates that were made there. But expect that we're going to continue to see rather large update sizes going forward. We've talked about this last year. We saw our first cumulative update that shipped with AI features and saw it a couple of times last year where that size got rather large. Windows 11, you're basically looking at 4 gig. Windows or Server 2025, you're looking at 2 gig in size. So expect that this is going to be the norm going forward. Not every month, but several months each year, you're going to have updates in that size range. All right. So making sure that you've got technologies in place like peer-to-peer capabilities or distribution servers that you can have to reduce the distribution of bits across network boundaries and keep it to local network segments. Again, if you're using the Ivanti products, you've got combinations of those peer-to-peer and preferred server or distribution server capabilities in our products that help you to reduce that overall impact and make sure that you're only moving bits across boundaries once at most, ideally, and everything else gets distributed locally within that network segment. Known issues for Windows 11 this month. There's the icon, the password icon may be missing or invisible in the lock screen sign-in options. If you hover over the space where the icon should appear, you'll see that the password button is still available. Select this placeholder to open the password text box and enter your password. Unfortunately, most users may not notice or see that very easily. The workaround, you can use known issue rollback following the directions in the knowledge base article. The issue first appeared following the August update and primarily affects enterprise or managed IT environments. So unfortunately, most of you. Microsoft is working on a resolution still, but some of you may have been seeing this since August. So just an FYI, still going on. And Todd didn't change the December on there. That should be saying January. Apologies for that. Todd had a rush in getting this stuff done last night, and I didn't catch that in my review of it this morning. So we'll get that updated too. That's supposed to say January on those, but he basically copied that forward because the issue was still the same as what we had last month. The next one is Windows 10 LTSB and server editions. Because they share the same core, that's why we have this on the same bulletin update. Severity in this case was important. It does include the known exploit and the 2 disclosures, again, because those are all rated important as well. That's why it's not critical. It's only important because none of those were actually listed as critical. That's why that risk-based approach is important. The known issues, we've got the WSUS. So if you're using WSUS per Windows Server Update Services, does not display synchronization error details within its error reporting. It's temporarily removed to address the remote code execution vulnerability from 2025. So both for the Server 22-23H2 edition and the Server 2022, that is still a known issue. Office updates this month are critical. You'll notice that there is a 2016 update again. We're calling this out because Microsoft included it there. Yes, 2016 was end of life, but they are still including this in this month's update. This doesn't mean you can rely on them to keep doing it, but just make sure that you're aware of, that if you are running 2016 yet, there is an update for it this month. But again, don't count on it going forward. There are no disclosures or exploits in the update, but it is rated critical. 11 CVEs were resolved in this month's update. All right. And then the next one is the security updates for Microsoft 365 apps. Again, critical in the rating. 10 CVEs resolved and nothing additional reported for known issues there. One note, security updates provided for Office 2019, which is beyond recent EOL. So make sure that if you're running 2019, there was an update provided for that. But again, it's not a guarantee that Microsoft will continue to do that. SharePoint Server did get an update this month. It is rated important. Fixed 7 CVEs, no reported known issues for this one at this time. SQL Server, also rated important. This one resolved 1 CVE. The CVE is not publicly disclosed or known to be exploited, so important is the rating there. So for SharePoint and for SQL Server, again, the urgency is less here, but just make sure that you get them adequately tested and rolled out in a timely fashion. No reported known issues for SQL Server at this point either. All right. Before I jump into the Between the Patch Tuesdays, just checking again to make sure that I've got any additional questions. So Chris said that he's seeing around 3.7 gigabytes for the Windows 11 patch on their servers. So it may vary depending on which Windows 11 or Server 2025 patch you're looking at. The sizes will vary. I spot checked a handful of them as I was going through. I saw anywhere from like 3.9 to 4.25 gig. But you're probably just looking at one of the additions or variations of the patch that I didn't look at in particular, Chris. So for everybody, though, expect that your size for that is going to range between, 3.6, 3.7 gig, all the way up into the 4.3 gig in size. So, okay, so it looks like the SQL 2022 definition is not released yet from what it looks like. Okay, thank you, Long. Appreciate that. Long was just updating us that the team saw it fail in testing last night. So between last night and today, again, I'm short-staffed without Todd being here. He usually catches those things with the team right away in the morning. I didn't catch that, so I apologize that we didn't note that before. But we'll get that SQL 2022 CU updated and released as soon as we can. As far as size, I would say that the average size prior to last year, prior to the introduction of many of the AI features, was in the gigabyte to 2 gigabyte range. Since last year, with the Windows 11 and Server 2025 releases, including a lot more of these AI features, we've been seeing that in the 2 gig to 4 gig range on average. So expect that most of your updates are going to spike to that 4 gig range for the Windows 11 side, probably at least once every 2 to 3 months. But expect that your average cumulative update is going to be around 2 gig going forward. That's what we've been seeing. That's been the trend. It doesn't mean every month will be that size, but chances are they will have, many of these are going to be around that size and growing potentially. Again, the introduction of AI puts a lot more size into what gets delivered down to those endpoints. So, all right. Between the Patch Tuesdays, we did have a number of updates between December and January Patch Tuesdays. You can see here, we break this into 3 categories. There's the security updates with CVEs. These are updates that have confirmed CVEs resolved in them. We also have a security updates without CVEs, because the majority of these applications they're called continuous delivery updates. But basically, if Google Chrome pushes their next update with no security changes in it, it still includes all of the security fixes from the previous version, because everything is just a continuous build. They don't have a separate non-security branch that they're pushing. So the security updates without CVEs, those are applications that there were no reported CVEs, but those applications do have CVEs somewhere in their history. So in that chain, you could be resolving CVEs by going to the latest version, even if this particular update didn't apply them. The one before it or 2 before it may have resolved some, depending on what version's currently on the machine and what version you're deploying. There's a high likelihood you could still be resolving CVEs, even if the current one did not. So that's why we do this breakout there. The third bucket there, non-security updates, those are specific non-security updates separate from that. That's, you could deploy if you want to, but the first 2 buckets are really the ones to focus on most. All right. For the Windows side, we'll talk about Mac in a moment. We had Google Chrome, several releases since December. The most recent one, the 143.0.7499.913 sorry, can't speak today. That one was released last week on the 6th, I believe, and caught a little bit of news there. That 2026 vulnerability there is one that is in WebView. So WebView is a common component It's one that it will be highly valuable to threat actors if they're able to exploit it. So there's been some urgency put on that one, even though there's no disclosures or exploits. It's kind of a perfect CVE to exploit because it has the ability to branch across multiple possible applications or platforms. That web view component could be in the OS level, it could be in the browser level, it could be in multiple applications within an environment. So if a threat actor can figure out how to exploit that web view component, they may be able to port that attack to multiple platforms. So that's why there's a little bit more urgency on that one. Firefox did have some other updates between the Patch Tuesdays. So the 146.0.1 resolved 2 CVEs there. Foxit PDF editor had a few updates there, depending on which versions you're on, and the PDF reader as well. 11 CVEs resolved in each of those. And then the last one here for Foxit Reader Enterprise, also resolving 11 CVEs. On the Apple side, you can see there were a number of Apple updates between the Patch Tuesdays. There was the Safari for Sonoma, for Sequoia, and the macOS Sonoma and Sequoia updates. macOS Tahoe, Google Chrome updates, Firefox, each of those applications there were also updated for the Mac. Office, Zoom client. So make sure that you're keeping up to date with your Mac OS and third-party updates as well. CVE information on those, the Mac OS updates, Sonoma resolved 21 CVEs in the most recent OS update, 26 in Sequoia, and 47 in Tahoe. And then Safari, the updates across each of those editions fixed 11 CVEs. Yes, Mark, there was a Chrome update from yesterday as well. That came out after we were putting together this content. So let me see if I can grab the info of what came out in yesterday's Chrome update. We have this complicated balancing act that we have to do. So when we put together all this information, we've got multiple things that we're trying to do. One of them is getting PR kind of visibility across the industry. Each of those articles that I talked about before, several of those industry experts are quoted by writers with information about that. We also get picked up in a lot of those things. So you could see that I was quoted in CSO Online or Krebs on Security, or there was one other that I was picked up in this month. To get those things, I have to work with our PR agency and get that out quickly. For other stuff like the other content we're putting together, we just try to get that out as quickly as possible so you can use it to start planning. So yeah, Long put in the details for the Chrome release yesterday. That was 144.0.7559.60. Long, how many CVEs were resolved in that one yesterday? There were definitely no exploits or disclosures in it. Otherwise, I would have seen news on it this morning when I was doing some news collection. So at most, it'll just be a regular Chrome, critical update where you want to get it resolved in your normal maintenance. 10 CVEs. So last night's Chrome update resolved 10 CVEs. Add that to the one from the week before. That's your 11 that you're resolving for this week, depending on what versions your Chrome update is up to. But yes, thank you, Mark, for pointing that out. Apple did get a number of Chrome and Firefox updates. Microsoft Edge updated as well. And the Office updates that were released for the Microsoft side also released for the Mac side. So a number of CVEs to resolve there in the third-party updates. And Zoom Client was the last one. So those are the Mac OS third-party updates that you want to make sure you get resolved. If you are on the Ivanti.com website, you can go to Resources, and then under here we've got a landing page for Patch Tuesday. This is kind of the landing page for everything, including signing up for the webinar series. So if you were here for the first time, you'd register for the webinar series, and then you should be getting those updates on a regular basis. But on Patch Tuesday, we update and make the infographic and blog available here. So you'll be able to link to those. That infographic is one of the things that we work on and try to get out the door in a timely manner. So Chrome is the one thing that is often a wild card on here. But you can see we try to summarize a lot of what we cover to make sure that you're getting critical information quickly. Things like the known exploited, disclosed, those types of information about the different updates we try to make sure are out to you same day. The blog post, I go into a lot of detail that we cover in the webinar as well. But if you want to get that early on, it gives you the coverage of what was coming out for third-party updates. At that point, again, Chrome hadn't released. Oracle is also not released yet. Their quarterly CPU is actually next week, Tuesday. So this gives you some additional information there at times, but also gives you kind of that, here's your January to-do list. These are the things that you want to make sure you're paying the most attention to. The browser updates, the Windows OS update, that was kind of the main focus there. And then reviewing that secure boot certificate timelines and your usage of that Agearsoft modem because it's being removed, making sure you know what's going to break, if anything. Those were kind of the top priorities of what to look at. So you would get information like that same day, but this gives you access to all of that, and you can see all of the previous Patch Tuesdays. So you'll be able to go back and take a look at everything else there. Chrome, one of the challenges we've been having with Chrome is they could release anywhere from on time right along with everything else to late in the evening and even into the AM of the following day. So we've not been able to hold and wait for Chrome reliably. So we kind of make a call typically at about 2 p.m. Central Time. If we've got everything else ready to go, we package it up and deliver this. So again, back to some of the comments of, did Chrome release yesterday? Yes, it did. It just released much later in the day than our content delivery was for there. So apologies for that, but we always try to get you the most information in a timely manner as possible. All right, let me see if there were any other Windows 11 December 2025 update caused slowdowns in performance issues. Okay, so Pete is saying that they're seeing some performance impacts after doing the Windows 11 update from December. Okay. Depending on if anybody else was running into those, Microsoft did not have a official known issue around that, Pete. So again, in your case, it looks like you're suspecting the Apex deployment service changing from a manual to automatic startup, which may have increased resource usage. So that could be something, if people are running into that might be something to look for within your environments. And thank you all. We'll talk to you next month.